Diplomatic talks are being held in Europe as the US Vice President Kamala Harris and NATO members discuss rising tensions with Russia over Ukraine. Let's go straight to Peter Mathews, Professor of Political Science at Cyprus College in LA. And Professor, 190,000 troops now on the border.
Yes, and that's pretty much an increase in the last few weeks. But I believe you have to look at the geography and how, if you want to settle this problem, and that is Russia has had no natural boundaries toward the west, no large rivers, no mountain ranges, and there have been invasions. 200 years ago, Napoleon devastated Russia, invaded Moscow and burned it down. Kaiser Wilhelm came in next. Hitler came in after, but before that, there was also intervention during the Allied War, World War I, when the Allies intervened in Russia. So they have a paranoid sense of being overcome easily without defense, and they want to make sure that NATO will not include Ukraine, because that's where a lot of the invasions have taken place from. And so we have to negotiate that and ensure that Ukraine is going to be secure. At the same time, Putin agrees not to use force against Ukraine and starts de-escalating by moving troops back and equipment back. That has to be negotiated diplomatically. Otherwise, we're going to be in real big trouble, and you could have an unintended war that could break out, Tim.
Yeah, no representation of Russia in these talks in Munich either.
No, and they should be. I mean, how are you going to end up having a real negotiation unless all sides are represented to the conflict? And this has to be done immediately. You can't wait around, because these things have a chance of spiraling out of control. And once something starts like this, a conflagration, it can just erupt into further and regional violence, then a whole European war, and perhaps even a world war, because don't forget, the two major protagonists, the United States and Russia, have, well, how many thousands of nuclear weapons and missiles? The good thing is that when we negotiated with the old Soviet Union, both sides were willing to de-escalate and to accommodate and have détente under President Nixon. And both sides came up with the different treaties, like INF Treaty, the Conventional Forces in Europe Treaty, to reduce troop numbers. Those were achieved once the United States and Western Europe agreed to accept, in the Helsinki Accords, to accept the Soviet Union as a legitimate country. And in exchange, the Soviets agreed to respect human rights, economic and political. And so there was like an accommodation. And leaving the language a bit not so precise was at times okay in terms of what kind of negotiation would be. But we have to get this down under control by trying to walk on the other side's shoes.
It's very hard to define Vladimir Putin, isn't it, Professor? You work in political science yourself. What do you make of him?
I see him as knowing history. I mean, he goes back to the ancient time, the empire times when Ukraine was part of the Russian Empire, and they were actually founded, the Russian Empire and its ancestors were founded in Kiev, in that area, Ukraine. And so he sees this connection culturally, politically, geographically, historically, and he's also very much wounded or angry about the Soviet Union's collapse. And he wants to make sure that Russia will not be pushed any further back and lose its influence in that sphere of influence area. And so that's one reason he's holding out on Ukraine. Don't forget, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania were all taken in by the NATO after the United States and Europe and Britain and France agreed not to move NATO 1 inch eastward when Germany was uniting. That was a condition that President Gorbachev actually insisted on. And President Gorbachev, when he said, if you want Germany, we want Germany to unite, you have to agree not to extend NATO. And James Baker, the Secretary of State of the United States, actually promised not to extend NATO 1 inch eastward. And yet it started by 1997, when everything was going so well. Then it was expanded further in 2004, and then things started deteriorating between Russia and the United States at that time.
Well, Russia certainly isn't the power of the Soviet Union. It is, it's slowed down. I know that you mentioned before about nuclear weapons, but you could go around the world. Lots of countries now have nuclear weapons. They could be strangled. It's a very, very dangerous move from Russia, isn't it, when you look at the wagon circling with what could be put in place, particularly for the people of Russia?
Absolutely, and that's where we have to diffuse the situation. Russia is not even close to as powerful as the Soviet Union was, and it doesn't have the warm water ports that it needs, as many as the United States or other countries, to have major naval action. So it's limited in that area. It does have nuclear weapons. It's got a large army, but it's not the kind of economy the Soviet Union was either. It's a much weaker, smaller economy. And therefore, we have to consider all that. When the Western leaders are negotiating, we have to consider the United States and the Western powers are much more powerful than Russia, and concern of this security situation that Russia has had based on its history has to be accommodated in the case of Ukraine, at the same time protecting and guaranteeing Ukrainians their independence without joining NATO formally. This has got to be the formula we have to work on. It has to be worked out this way.
Yeah, it's an interesting time, and there's lots of argy-bargy, if I can use that colloquialism. But let's just get domestically to the US quickly and the COVID situation. It looks like it's improving right around the world now.
It does, and the numbers in the United States have come down too. Our infection rates have gone down by 75% since January. Our death rates have climbed, and keep in mind, almost 1 million Americans have died from COVID. It's like 930,000. And so many are dying per day. 3,187, over 3,000 deaths on the 17th of February, which is more than how many died on 9/11. That was 2,900 deaths. So this is a terrible situation where every day over 3,000 Americans are dying. We have to get that under control through vaccination, through masking, through social distancing. Keep that going at the same time that we can be a little bit more open in terms of, socializing, but make sure you're safe. And I don't know, I think some of these states are precipitously opening up the non-masking to indoor activity. That's too soon, I think, to indoor activity. Outdoors is different. So go one step at a time. Don't let your guard down fully all at once and then have another resurgence as we did after July 4th. Remember, we declared independence from the virus on July 4th. All the masks came off, and what happened? And Delta came in. This could happen again. We could have a new variant. So let's be cautious toward the ending days when we can actually get this under control.
Yeah, hopefully 2022 is going to be a very different year. I'm remaining positive and confident about it. Professor, always good to chat.
Same here, Tim. Thank you so much.